A young son, a devoted brother, a first-generation Irish American. He excelled in academics, thrived as an athlete, and was tirelessly studying to conquer the grueling CPA exam. Chad O'Melia was the embodiment of every parent's dream. But in a shocking twist of fate, this golden boy was found brutally murdered, stabbed over 100 times. What dark forces had turned his promising life into a horrific nightmare? Chad Brandon O'Melia was born on September 27, 1991, in Santa Clarita, a city located north of Los Angeles, California. His father, Sean O'Melia, an Irish construction supervisor, and his mother, Michelle, separated when Chad was just 5 years old. Despite their separation, they worked hard to ensure Chad had a happy childhood. According to those close to him, Chad was a kind young man with a bright smile and boundless energy. He had a great sense of humor and was always responsible and dedicated. His friends saw him as the big brother of the group, always looking out for them without expecting anything in return. Chad developed a passion for American football at a young age and played throughout his teenage years. He continued playing while attending Chico State University, where he studied accounting and eventually graduated. After graduation, Chad moved to an apartment in Thousand Oaks, part of the greater Los Angeles area, taking his dog, Athena, with him. He shared the apartment with a young man named Vinny Oliveira. Alongside working at an accounting firm, Chad was studying to obtain his Certified Public Accountant, CPA, certificate. However, his busy days left him with insufficient sleep at night, leading him to develop a habit of using cannabis to help him sleep. According to Vinny, Chad was often intoxicated when seen at the apartment. Chad didn't hide this from others, and even his parents were aware of his cannabis use. Although they didn't approve, they didn't see it as the worst thing he could be doing. Sean explained in an interview that Chad never smoked when visiting him because he knew Sean disliked it. Sean considered cannabis a dirty substance with a foul smell that changed Chad's personality and decreased his motivation and concentration. Little did Sean expect that Chad's addiction to cannabis would dramatically change his life, all because of a woman he barely knew. Bryn Spoicher was born on January 25, 1991 in Chicago, Illinois. From a very young age, Bryn faced serious health issues that required numerous surgeries and strong medications. These medical procedures and medications severely deteriorated her hearing. At 4 years old, she began using cochlear implants to hear better and also learned to read lips. Her medical condition made her feel isolated and different from others. Throughout her schooling, she was often the only student with hearing loss and would hide her hearing aids to fit in and avoid teasing. As she grew older, she decided to turn this aspect of herself that once embarrassed her into a strength. Bryn pursued a doctorate in audiology at the University of Washington School of Medicine, graduating in the 2010 S. She excelled in her field, with one professor stating that out of the thousands of graduate students he had taught, Bryn stood out as brilliant, and none could surpass her. In August 2017, at the age of 26, Bryn moved to Thousand Oaks and secured a job as an audiologist at UCLA Health, a health system comprising various medical centers, including the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. For almost a year, she lived in a rental apartment that didn't allow pets, so she had to leave her Siberian husky, Arya, with her family in Illinois. It wasn't until April 2018 that she found a place where she could bring her beloved canine companion. Having Arya by her side again significantly improved Bryn's daily life, as she had trained the dog as a service animal 2 years earlier when Arya was just a puppy. Bryn often took Arya for walks at Conejo Creek, a popular park in Thousand Oaks. It was there, at her favorite spot, that she met Chad in late April 2018. According to her account, Chad was the one who initially approached her. On several occasions when their paths crossed, the 26-year-old Chad asked for her phone number, but she declined each time. Eventually, Chad handed her his business card so she could text him if she ever wanted to meet up. That's exactly what Bryn did, and soon they began an informal relationship. They would go out to eat or hang out with friends, and once, they shared a bottle of Irish whiskey while watching their dogs play in the park. Bryn was drawn to Chad's sarcastic humor, which contrasted with his kind and sweet personality. She expressed that although she wasn't sure they'd get along at first, she soon realized they fit together like puzzle pieces. On Sunday, May 27, 2018, the day before Memorial Day, Bryn went out drinking with some friends. Chad contacted her later, inviting her to visit. Around 10:30 p.m., the 27-year-old Bryn arrived at Chad's place with Arya. They spent time together, drinking a bit and chatting with Chad's roommate, Vinny. Shortly after midnight, Chad took out his water pipe and loaded it with cannabis. He went out to the balcony to smoke alone, but Bryn soon joined him and asked for a hit. After inhaling, all she felt was a burning sensation in her throat, which made her cough. She told Chad that she had never had good experiences with cannabis, as she never felt its effects as others described. Surprised, Chad loaded the pipe again with even more cannabis, encouraging her to try again to feel the effects. Bryn complied and smoked again. What happened next was so horrific it seemed like fiction. In the early hours of May 28th, the Thousand Oaks police responded to an emergency call made by Vinny. Something terrible was happening at the residence and they needed immediate help. When officers arrived, their body cameras captured the violent scene unfolding inside the apartment. Bryn had savagely attacked Chad with several sharp objects taken from the kitchen and then turned one on herself. The footage is so graphic it has not been released to the public. In an attempt to stop her, officers fired a taser 4 times, but Bryn seemed unaffected by the electric shocks. They then used their batons, striking her 9 times until she finally dropped the weapon. Bryn suffered 5 fractures in one arm and deep cuts on her neck, face, and right hand. She had also attacked her dog, Arya, who fortunately survived. Tragically, Chad was not as lucky. By the time police arrived, he was already lifeless on the floor, with a total of 108 wounds across his body, as later revealed by the forensic report. Bryn was rushed to the hospital and immediately taken into surgery to save her life. The procedure was successful, and she was admitted to the same health center for recovery. Investigators wasted no time and questioned Bryn as soon as she regained consciousness, still intubated and unable to speak. She responded in writing, briefly recounting that she had told Chad she didn't want to smoke anymore, but he had forced her to do so. This response led detectives to believe that Bryn did not remember her actions, a revelation they decided to share with her a few days later. Once Bryn had sufficiently recovered from her injuries, she was arrested and charged with homicide. The aftermath of the incident impacted not only Bryn, but also her victim and their families. It was Chad's father, Sean, who had to break the tragic news to his ex-wife, Michelle. In an interview, the grieving father chose not to disclose how he delivered the news, as the memory was too painful to revisit. However, he did share that he requested the police allow him to personally inform Michelle, wanting to be there to console and support her. He recalled seeing the moment her soul shattered as he spoke the words. From that moment, Michelle fell into deep depression. Sean reflected that losing a child brings overwhelming guilt and makes one doubt if happiness is ever possible again. This was Michelle's experience, compounded by her type 2 diabetes. After the funeral, she felt she had no right to smile. She refused to let loved ones take photos of her looking happy, believing it would be disrespectful to her mourning and her son. This mindset led her to neglect her health, ceasing her medical treatment. 18 months after Chad's death, Michelle passed away from severe cardiac dysfunction. Tragically, she did not live to see the conclusion of Bryn's trial. Though it's impossible to know, it's likely the delay between the last hearing and the sentencing of the person responsible for her son's death would have caused her even more pain. Sean explained in later interviews that shortly after the legal proceedings against Bryn began, he started receiving notifications that the defense had requested extensions, claiming they needed more time to prepare for trial. These messages arrived at least every 6 months. This situation dragged on for over 5 years, also impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thus, the first trial hearing did not occur until November 9, 2023. During this initial proceeding, Bryn, fully recovered from her injuries, had the opportunity to testify before the jury and those present in the courtroom. The then 32-year-old woman, equipped with a real-time transcription monitor on both the witness stand and the defendant's bench, shared her story. Bryn recounted her life before describing the events of May 27, 2018. She stated that after encouraging her to smoke a second time, Chad got up to fetch the water pipe. Once loaded, he brought it to her face, insisting she inhale immediately to feel the effects. Bryn explained she felt she couldn't refuse him, admitting he hadn't used physical force, but his persistence frightened her. She revealed that Chad did not always exhibit the sweet demeanor others attributed to him, and that she had seen him in bad moods, which pressured her into compliance. According to Bryn, minutes later she began to feel as if they were trapped in a time loop. The conversation with Chad seemed to repeat endlessly, giving her a constant sense of déjà vu. She lost the ability to form coherent sentences, which caused her anxiety. Seeking relief, she went back inside, lay down on the couch, and closed her eyes to calm herself. She then reported hearing voices in her head and seeing things with her eyes closed that were clearly not there, all while feeling trapped in a never-ending cycle. At some point, Bryn felt she had died, believing she was trapped inside her own corpse. She described seeing and hearing her loved ones mourning her, even feeling hands touching her body. This wasn't the most bizarre experience of that night. She claimed to have had an out-of-body experience, seeing her own body lying on the couch from above. She added that Chad was beside her, crying uncontrollably, and paramedics were attempting to revive her. Before continuing, Bryn clarified that what happened next felt as if she were in a movie, viewing events from the perspective of one of the characters, as if it were happening to someone else, not her. She recounted pushing the chairs aside in the apartment to make her way to the kitchen, where she grabbed 2 knives and threw them forcefully at Chad. She then took 2 more knives and approached one of the dogs, attacking it. Bryn thought she heard Chad ask why she had hurt Athena, but later learned it was Arya. She then walked to where Chad was standing, and just as she raised the knife against him, she lost consciousness completely. Despite this, she continued hearing voices in her head, urging her not to stop. She also heard Vinny, who ran out of the apartment to call the authorities. The hallucinations persisted for what felt like hours, becoming so intense that she ended up cutting her own neck with the knife. After that, everything went black again. Eventually, Bryn regained consciousness, though not fully and not for long. It was not a slow, gradual process, but quite the opposite. She felt the electric shocks from the police taser used to make her drop the knife, and in her delirium, she thought they were using a defibrillator to resuscitate her. She recalled waking up in the hospital when authorities began asking her about what had happened. However, her memories were blurry, and she couldn't distinguish what was real from what she had hallucinated. It wasn't until 2 days later that investigators informed her she had killed Chad. The defense attorney referenced tests conducted on the water pipe after the incident and called another person to explain the results. The expert stated that drug detection tests are not 100% reliable, as some substances might not be immediately identifiable. He asserted that while the report clearly indicated the presence of THC, the main psychoactive component of cannabis, there was a significant possibility the weed had been laced with something else. This was even more probable if Chad had purchased it from an illegal vendor, who might add other substances to enhance effects and reduce costs, despite recreational marijuana being legal in California at that time. Bryn's legal team also highlighted that until then, it had been overlooked that Vinny, Chad's roommate, had smoked the same substance earlier and also experienced hallucinations. Based on this, Bryn's defense portrayed her as an innocent woman with little experience in substance use, who couldn't have known what she was smoking when coerced into it. This was corroborated by testimonies from her acquaintances. Old friends from high school testified that she was never interested in drugs, which was why she had cut ties with some people. A 33-year-old woman named Amy Carriwick, who met Bryn in 2007, mentioned they bonded over shared interests in high school. She noted that while Bryn played basketball, she played softball, and they both enjoyed activities typically unpopular among girls like camping and hiking. Bryn first smoked marijuana in 2014 when she started dating a man named Kevin, with whom she had a 3-year relationship. The couple took a joint to a mountain campsite in Washington and decided after smoking that it wasn't for them. Kevin, a personal trainer and ex-Marine, believed Chad could have coerced her into smoking that night. He explained that they broke up in 2017 when Bryn moved to California, but described her as carefree, charismatic, and pleasant. It was logical for the defense attorneys to base their strategy on these arguments, as California's penal code stipulates that individuals under the influence of drugs or alcohol are fully responsible for their actions unless they were forced or deceived into intoxication. Despite their efforts, the jury ultimately rejected this argument. The statement Bryn had given to the police while still hospitalized became the primary issue facing the prosecutor and the defense. The accused had initially provided a written statement confessing that she had voluntarily taken the second hit from Chad's pipe. She claimed this document had been concealed from the prosecution for a time. Moreover, in one of the hearings, the prosecutor unveiled new evidence that could potentially turn the trial around. She portrayed Bryn in a starkly different light than the defense did, supporting her argument with a series of text messages exchanged in 2018 between Bryn and several friends. In these communications, Bryn referenced getting so drunk that she had to miss work the next day and mentioned consuming cannabis-infused foods. This served as a basis for the prosecutor to question not only Bryn's original statement, but also all her testimonies. The prosecutor emphasized that Bryn had not mentioned to investigators or doctors that she had been pressured or intimidated during most of her interviews. Bryn responded to both allegations. She explained that she tended to exaggerate her experiences when talking to friends, but had never been so drunk as to black out or miss work due to a hangover. She added that she had only been late to work once after a night out drinking. Regarding the interrogations, Bryn stated she hadn't shared all the information with the police in each interview because she assumed the detectives already knew everything after repeating the same answers multiple times. To counter the prosecution's claims, the defense hired mental health experts who determined that Bryn had not suffered from any mental illness, problems, or violent tendencies before the attack, suggesting that a marijuana-induced psychotic episode was the only explanation for her actions. This argument undermined the prosecutor's case, leading the jury to reduce the charge. On December 1, 2023, after 4 hours of deliberation, Bryn was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter instead of the initial charge of murder. The verdict was a shock to the victim's family and friends. On January 22, 2024, the day before the sentencing hearing, they gathered in front of the county government building, demanding a sentence fitting the severity of Bryn's crimes. On January 23, 2024, the courtroom was filled with spectators, journalists, and family members. The room was so crowded that staff had to place people in the jury box and even had some standing in the aisle. Amid sobs, Bryn took the stand one last time to apologize to Chad's family, especially his father, who had endured the ordeal without the support of Chad's mother. However, the most emotional moment of the hearing came when Chad's paternal grandmother read a statement she had written. The elderly woman addressed Bryn, expressing forgiveness for what she had done, adding that if she couldn't forgive her, God wouldn't forgive her either. After nearly 6 years of waiting, the judge sentenced Bryn to 2 years of probation instead of the 5 years in prison she faced after being found guilty in December 2023. As part of her punishment, she was required to complete 100 hours of community service to raise awareness about cannabis-induced psychosis. She was warned that violating the terms of her probation could result in imprisonment. Following the verdict, Sean criticized the judge for what he perceived as a biased decision influenced by the defendant's gender and race. He also expressed concern about the message this decision sent regarding marijuana use, feeling it gave consumers a green light to justify illegal actions. Lastly, he suggested that Bryn should be hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation to study her brain's unique chemistry, believing that the drug alone wasn't the sole cause of the alleged psychotic episode and hoping an investigation might clarify it. The prosecutor voiced her concerns about the precedent set by the judge's decision, describing the sentence as a mockery of the criminal justice system. She considered this case, marked as involuntary manslaughter, one of the most atrocious and violent cases in her 29-year career seeking justice. The tragic end of Chad and the lenient sentence given to Bryn sparked a debate on recreational cannabis use. A famous forensic psychiatrist noted that the increasing acceptance of cannabis in society led to misinformation about its associated risks. He pointed to various studies showing a clear link between cannabis use and psychosis, though he admitted it doesn't occur in 100% of cases. As the legal system faced criticism for its handling of the case, society reflected on the risks associated with cannabis use, questioning whether marijuana is truly a catalyst for violence or merely a trigger among a broader set of circumstances or pre-existing medical conditions. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Stephanie Scott was a well-known and highly respected high school teacher from New South Wales, Australia. On Easter Sunday in 2015, she had gone to school to prepare for her upcoming classes. Later that afternoon, as she was leaving, she was ambushed from behind and forced into a storage closet where a grisly, callous, and disturbing crime unfolded. But the most shocking part was yet to come. As police soon discovered, the crime hit much closer to home than anyone could have anticipated. Evidence revealed that Stephanie knew her attacker. This heartbreaking, stomach-churning story is one of the most cold and heartless crimes I've ever covered here on Unreal True Crime. Stephanie Scott was born on October 14, 1988, in Sydney, Australia. She was the second youngest of 5 children born to Marilyn and Robert Scott, affectionately known as Bob. The family made their home in Canawindra, a small town with around 2,000 residents located in the central western region of New South Wales. Growing up in the serene and peaceful surroundings of their family farm, Stephanie and her siblings formed a close-knit, loving family that cherished the simple joys of life. Stephanie was an extraordinary child raised in a healthy, joyful environment brimming with love. She was not only beautiful and intelligent, but also possessed a kind, gentle, and compassionate personality. Known for her sense of humor, Stephanie loved playing pranks. Her loved ones described her as noble, affectionate, and down-to-earth, always willing to lend a helping hand. Putting others before herself was a fundamental aspect of her character. With her infectious joy and radiant smile, Stephanie could brighten anyone's day. Even from a young age, she displayed wisdom beyond her years, listening without judgment and offering the best advice. Her empathy and ability to inspire were remarkable, and she despised cruelty, especially towards children and animals. As a teenager with a keen sense of fashion, she became a role model for her peers. After finishing primary school, Stephanie attended the high school where her father worked. It was there that she met Aaron Leeson Woolley, a charming classmate who shared her passion for football. They quickly became friends and both took part-time jobs at a local supermarket. Spending so much time together, Aaron became like a member of the Scott family. Upon graduating from high school, Stephanie chose to follow in her father's footsteps and pursue a career in education. Aaron supported her decision, even though it meant she would have to move to Wagga Wagga for university. The distance made them realize their true feelings for each other. In May 2010, during Aaron's 21st birthday party, their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. Despite the physical distance, they maintained their bond through frequent visits, shared holidays, and constant communication via phone and text. Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day, and everyone believed they were meant to be together. After Stephanie graduated and returned home, she received a job offer in another town. The couple moved to Leeton, a small agricultural town in New South Wales. Before they left, Marilyn, proud of her daughter's achievements, gifted Stephanie a graduation ring. Once settled in their new home, Stephanie began her career teaching English and drama at Leeton High School. She was incredibly happy because teaching was undoubtedly her true passion. Her dedication to each student was evident. She didn't just impart knowledge but also took a genuine interest in their feelings and thoughts. Stephanie became a mentor to many of them, her remarkable personality making her very popular among the students. She also earned the admiration and respect of her colleagues. Her ever-present smile reminded everyone that fulfilling one's vocation was a key to happiness. A joyous event took place on April 11, 2014. Stephanie and Aaron got engaged. They set their wedding date for exactly a year later. Stephanie poured her heart into planning their wedding, meticulously attending to every detail to ensure their guests would enjoy the day as much as she would. Aaron supported her every step of the way, even taking dance classes with her so their first dance as a married couple would be perfect. They also made reservations for their honeymoon in Fiji, convinced it was the most romantic destination for any couple in love. They never imagined their plans would be tragically cut short. On March 2, 2015, a new employee joined the company contracted to clean the school where Stephanie worked. His name was Vincent Stanford, a 24-year-old born on December 21, 1990, in Tasmania. Vincent had an identical twin named Marcus. When the twins were 3, the family moved to the Netherlands. His father eventually returned to Australia and lost contact with them, leaving his mother to raise the children alone. Vincent's childhood was typical, but as he grew, he became increasingly withdrawn and had severe difficulties socializing. His behavior problems at school escalated, earning him the nickname Psycho due to his violent outbursts. According to later reports, Vincent began having homicidal thoughts around the age of 7 or 8. At 12, he attacked his teacher, attempting to strangle her. As a result, he was expelled and sent to a behavior school for socially maladjusted children. Later, he was admitted to a psychiatric center for teenagers, where he was diagnosed with autism and oppositional defiant disorder. This diagnosis indicated his challenges in forming friendships and relationships. After his release, Vincent tried to enroll in university and join the military, but both attempts were unsuccessful. In 2013, he returned to Australia with his mother and siblings. Vincent appeared quiet and reserved, with his distinct Dutch accent, and had no friends or social contacts. He found the company of others stressful and cycled through various jobs before being hired by the cleaning company servicing Stephanie's school. Vincent's troubling behavior soon resurfaced. Unbeknownst to anyone, he began watching female students during lunch and secretly in the bathrooms. He fixated on a 12-year-old girl, stalking her both inside and outside school, taking daily photographs and documenting her movements in a notebook. He seemed to be planning to abduct her. It was later discovered that he also stalked 2 women working in nearby shops. By Easter week 2015, less than a week before Stephanie and Aaron's wedding, the couple was invited to a party in their hometown. Stephanie couldn't travel because she needed to prepare lessons for her substitute teacher and finalize a few details for the reception. Aaron didn't want to go without her but wanted to see his parents and best friend before the wedding. On Friday, April 3rd at 12:30 p.m., Aaron left for his hometown, unaware that it would be the last time he would see the woman he was about to marry. The young couple kept in touch through calls and text messages. Aaron attended the Saturday night party and then stayed at his parents' house. He and his fiancée spoke on the phone, saying their goodnights around 10:30 p.m. On the morning of Sunday, April 5th, 2015, Stephanie left her home to go to the school. While on her way, she sent a text to Aaron detailing her plans for the day. Around 11 a.m., she parked her red Mazda 3 next to the school. Then, she walked a few blocks to pick up the school keys from a colleague who lived nearby. Her coworker accompanied her back to the school and watched as she entered and locked the front door behind her. She went up to the second floor to the English teacher's lounge, where she sat down to work on her computer. Unexpectedly, Vincent was also in the building. Hearing noises, he passed by the lounge and saw Stephanie for the first time. Despite working there for over a month, he had never met her and had no idea she would be there. As he later confessed, upon seeing her, he felt an overwhelming urge to take her life. Vincent went home to retrieve what he called his assault kit, which consisted of a bottle of lubricant erectile dysfunction pills, several condoms, and some flexible handcuffs. It took him about 10 minutes to go and return. Upon arriving back at the school, he stayed downstairs, waiting for Stephanie to come out. Around 1 p.m., Stephanie sent an email to the bus driver who would transport the wedding guests from the ceremony to the reception hall, confirming that she had made the final payment to secure the service. An hour later, she finished her work, turned off her laptop, and packed up to leave. She retraced her steps back to the main entrance, walking down the corridor towards the large metal gate. Almost there, she encountered Vincent. She smiled and wished him a happy Easter. As she was taking her keys out of her bag, Vincent grabbed her from behind and covered her mouth with his hand. Terrified, the 26-year-old tried to scream for help and kicked and scratched, trying to escape. But he overpowered her and dragged her down the hallway into a dark photo development room. Once inside, Stephanie tried to flee, but Vincent violently pushed her to the floor. He used his left arm to pin her down by her throat and began savagely punching her face with his right fist for almost a minute, repeatedly, until she was unconscious. He then put on a condom and sexually assaulted her. Afterward, he took out a knife and inflicted several severe wounds to her neck. Once he was sure Stephanie was no longer breathing, he left the knife on the floor and went home to eat lunch. At home, he made himself a cheese sandwich and drank some coffee. Later, he returned to the school to clean the scene. Vincent washed the knife in the maintenance room and collected the items that had fallen from Stephanie in the hallway, including her car keys. He then moved her Mazda to the other side of the school. Returning to Stephanie, he placed yellow adhesive tape around her neck to contain the bleeding. Vincent placed a plastic sheet in the trunk of the car and put Stephanie's body on top. He closed the vehicle and re-entered the building, where he used a high-pressure cleaner to wash the crime scene. By then, it was past 3 p.m. Vincent left the school and drove Stephanie's car to his home, parking it behind a large shed in his backyard. He then walked back to the school to retrieve his white Toyota Hilux. Upon arrival, Vincent removed the floorboards from the darkroom, which were soaked with the young woman's bodily fluids. He loaded the wooden planks into his vehicle and returned home. Meanwhile, Aaron tried calling his fiancée, but she didn't answer. He found it odd but thought she might be deeply focused on her work or that her phone was on silent or out of battery. Before leaving his parents' house, he sent a text to confirm if they would go out for dinner when he got back, but received no reply. By around 7:30 p.m., Aaron arrived at the home they shared, surprised to find neither Stephanie nor her car there. His concern grew when she still hadn't responded to his messages. He decided to drive around town to look for her, checking at the high school, friends' houses, and the main street, but saw no sign of her car. Although increasingly worried, he thought pre-wedding nerves might have driven her to stay elsewhere for the night, so he returned home and tried to sleep. In the early hours of Monday, April 6th, Aaron woke up frequently at every noise, hoping Stephanie had returned. Meanwhile, Vincent had driven Stephanie's car, with her body in the trunk, to Cocopara National Park. Once there, he placed her on the ground, removed her clothes, and covered her with branches. He then doused her with gasoline and set her on fire. Vincent gathered the removed clothes, the car's sun visor, and the plastic sheet used to cover the trunk, and placed them in a bag. Before leaving, he picked up the gasoline canister. Vincent returned home, left the items in the shed, changed his clothes, and abandoned Stephanie's car near an irrigation canal. After 7:30 a.m., he drove around town, disposing of Stephanie's belongings in various trash bins along the main street and near a sports complex. However, he kept her driver's license and engagement and graduation rings. Meanwhile, Aaron had risen early to send another message to his girlfriend but received no response. He started calling friends and the Scott family, but no one had heard from Stephanie. By then, Aaron was convinced something was wrong and went to the police station to report his fiancée missing. The news caused a stir in the peaceful community, which quickly mobilized to search for her. The police immediately launched an operation and triangulated Stephanie's cell phone, but it was either turned off or not functioning. Checking her bank accounts revealed the last transaction occurred on Easter Saturday, and there were no recent social media posts or interactions. When detectives interviewed Stephanie's family, they were seriously concerned and made it clear she wouldn't disappear voluntarily, convinced something terrible had happened. At 8 a.m. on April 7, 2015, the police requested information via social media and the press. The case quickly garnered extensive coverage. A distraught Aaron appeared on television, pleading for his fiancée to call him. Detectives visited the high school searching for clues and inspected Stephanie's classroom. They checked the alarm system to confirm the time she had deactivated and reactivated it, establishing the duration she had been on the premises. Forensic services and a canine unit also arrived to search for evidence not immediately visible. By late Tuesday afternoon, a large group of Stephanie's family and friends gathered, desperate to enter the school, fearing she might be held captive on the grounds. The police convinced them not to force entry. It was then that a neighbor mentioned seeing Vincent, the school cleaner, working on Easter Sunday with his vehicle parked at the institution. Officers went to his house and, when questioned, Vincent admitted being at the school briefly to take out the trash. He denied knowing or seeing Stephanie there and wished them luck in their search, a comment that aroused suspicion in the detectives. The next day, April 8th, they decided to question him again. Since Vincent wasn't home, the police asked his mother to tell her son to contact them. Vincent had gone to the post office to mail a package containing Stephanie's rings and license to his brother. He then texted his brother to ask him to keep the package safe. By around 11 a.m., Vincent arrived at the police station and gave a statement to the detectives. He claimed he had been cleaning the school all weekend and hadn't seen anyone else there, except for some skateboarders who were later identified and interviewed. He added that he went to a supermarket afterward to buy food. This detail caught the officers' attention since they knew the named store was closed on Sundays. They contacted the store manager, who confirmed they were closed for Easter. An hour later, a special task force was activated to investigate the suspicious disappearance of the teacher. The team was composed of specialized agents and was implemented when cases became complex in Australia. The first thing the agents did was interview Vincent's employer, who told them that all his workers had time off for Easter, so Vincent shouldn't have been at the school those days. Detectives then called Vincent to confirm the supermarket story. He repeated his false account, making him the prime suspect. At 6 p.m., the detectives arrived at Vincent's residence. He wasn't there, but his mother and brother were. His mother consented to a search of the house. In Vincent's room, they found a set of keys on a red and white cord matching the description of the keys given to Stephanie by her colleague to access the school. They also found an empty condom wrapper and some unopened ones on the floor. Outside, they noticed fresh tire tracks leading from the front of the house to the backyard that didn't match Vincent's truck. At the end of the tracks, they found a used condom and yellow tape, prompting the agents to declare the area a crime scene. Vincent's family was escorted to the police station. Meanwhile, Vincent had returned to the location where he had abandoned Stephanie's body, taking photos. As he later revealed in an interview, he returned to see if she was still there or if wild animals had taken her. Unbeknownst to him, a group of Boy Scouts camping in the park had taken a photo at 5:34 p.m. that day, which would later be crucial. When Vincent returned home, he told the detectives he had been taking photos. A digital camera was on the passenger seat of his truck, and in the back were wooden planks with reddish stains. The vehicle was confiscated, and detectives asked Vincent to accompany them to the police station. Upon turning on the camera, the investigators saw the first image, burnt human remains in a bush, resembling a woman's body. At the station, Vincent continued denying any contact with Stephanie or her car. Although not yet under arrest, the conversation was recorded with his consent. They questioned Vincent about the various scratches on his face and right forearm. He explained that a week prior, he had hit his head and collided with tree branches. As for the photos found on his camera, Vincent claimed they were from a horror movie he downloaded from the internet because he found them amusing. After the interview, Vincent was placed under arrest and given the opportunity to speak with a lawyer, which he declined. However, he agreed to undergo several forensic tests, including a medical examination of his injuries with photographs and measurements, as well as nail scrapings and a mouth swab for DNA analysis. Once the results were in, the investigators had no doubt. Vincent was charged with the crime against Stephanie Scott, denied bail, and taken to jail. When Vincent's brother learned of his brother's arrest, he opened the package and found Stephanie's driver's license and photographed it before burning it. He kept the rings, awaiting further instructions from Vincent. The detectives analyzed Vincent's truck. The GPS system had recorded a trip to Cocopara National Park, and material found on the wheel arches indicated the vehicle had traveled on a gravel or dirt road. Additionally, a closed condom and a cell phone were discovered under the passenger seat. The stains on the wooden planks recovered from the truck were confirmed to be biological fluids matching Stephanie's genetic profile. On the morning of April 9, 2015, the police notified the Scott family of Vincent's arrest and the charges against him, including the photos found on his camera. They withheld the fact that the remains were burnt. However, the information about the burned body leaked to the national media, devastating Stephanie's loved ones. That same day, at 9:30 a.m., a car matching the description of Stephanie's car was found. The area was declared a crime scene, and the vehicle was taken for forensic analysis. Specialists found traces of fluids in the trunk and on the rear bumper, which matched Stephanie's DNA. There were also traces of Vincent's genetic code. A subsequent thorough forensic examination of the Stanford residence uncovered the plastic used to cover the Mazda's trunk and an empty gasoline can behind the shed. Inside, they found Stephanie's keys, a red bra identified by her family, and the sharp weapon used to kill her. In a closet, they discovered a bottle of lubricant, several condoms, and flexible handcuffs, all stained with the victim's blood. They seized a computer from Vincent's bedroom, which was later examined by the Electronic Evidence Unit. The hard drive contained numerous images of crimes, sexual assaults, and other disturbing content involving animals, as well as bomb-making materials and surveillance photos and videos of women and students. They also found that Vincent had spent the early hours of April 5th searching the internet for information about knives and had previously researched about abducting women and teachers. Additionally, he had looked into leg cuffs and made an online purchase of flexible handcuffs and a dagger-style knife. At 8 a.m. on April 10, 2015, a witness came forward at the police station, reporting that around 4 p.m. on Monday, they saw a vehicle resembling Vincent's parked by the main irrigation canal. The man said he saw someone throw a laptop into the water before running back to the truck and leaving. The next day, police divers retrieved the device. Forensic technology specialists dried it quickly, downloaded its contents, and confirmed it belonged to Stephanie. Despite police efforts, Stephanie's body remained missing. News outlets published photos of Vincent's vehicle, urging anyone with information to contact the police. The scouts who had been in Cocopera National Park on April 8th responded to this call. A photograph taken by one of the boys showed Vincent driving his white truck, leaving the area where he had allegedly abandoned Stephanie's body. Thanks to this lead, near 5 p.m. on April 10th, the day before Stephanie's scheduled wedding, police found charred human remains in a narrow scrubland strip in the park, near a road. Upon analysis, the body was identified as that of the missing teacher. On what should have been Stephanie and Aaron's wedding day, April 11, 2015, Vincent requested to speak with the lead investigator. Vincent finally confessed to the crime, stating that he had gone a bit crazy and felt an overwhelming urge to take Stephanie's life. He admitted to hitting her about 40 times but offered no reason or emotion behind his actions, suggesting his mental problems had resurfaced. When asked why he had a knife with him, Vincent explained that he kept it in the cleaning room as a tool he had previously used to open something. On April 13, 2015, an autopsy revealed that Stephanie died from blunt force trauma to the head. She had hematomas on the right side of her face, a small laceration on her eyebrow, a fractured nose, and an eye injury consistent with severe impact. Additionally, there were 2 knife wounds on the right side of her neck, with the right internal jugular vein being severed, though no associated hemorrhage was found along the cut's path. On April 21st, Vincent was interviewed again to clarify the details of his confession and to locate Stephanie's rings. Vincent revealed that his brother Marcus had helped with the rings. The next day, after 1 p.m., Stephanie's funeral was held, attended by over 1,500 people, including family, friends, students, and community members. They gathered at the location where she was supposed to marry Aaron. Many wore black with a touch of yellow. Townspeople tied yellow ribbons to trees along the route to the funeral. Stephanie's family and friends shared beautiful tributes about her reflective nature and care for others. On May 9, 2015, Vincent called his twin brother Marcus, asking him to sell the rings. Marcus, in an act he later described as misguided loyalty, pawned them for $705 in Adelaide. In a subsequent phone call, Vincent instructed Marcus to buy a plane ticket to visit him in jail and give the rest of the money to their mother. Marcus followed these instructions and visited Vincent on May 20th. 2 days later, Marcus was interviewed by the police. He denied receiving any packages from his brother and had deleted their text messages. Due to the case's uproar, Marcus and his father decided to move to a different city, where Marcus started working on a flower farm. However, on June 9th, authorities visited Marcus's new home. During the search, they seized a camera, a pawn shop receipt, and his mobile phone. Marcus was arrested and taken to New South Wales. charged as an accessory to murder, and placed in the Unitary Correctional Facility. On August 5th, during questioning, Marcus stated he never understood why Vincent sent him Stephanie's belongings, expressing confusion and anger. 7 months later, on March 31, 2016, Marcus pleaded guilty. On July 19, 2016, it was Vincent's turn to appear before the same court, where he pled guilty to aggravated sexual assault and murder. Psychological evaluations revealed a pattern of social and interpersonal deficits, including an inability to experience emotions, extreme detachment, and indifference to others. It was clear that he harbored violent thoughts, which, when stressed, could reach an intolerable level. He scored high on scales of perversion and violence, though his psychopathy tendencies were low. According to the presented tests, Vincent told the forensic psychologist that being around people was stressful and unpleasant for him. He claimed the crime was not premeditated and that, while he did not enjoy committing it, doing so helped reduce his overall tension and overwhelming need to kill the young woman. A month later, on August 24, 2016, Marcus was sentenced to 15 months without parole for being an accessory to his brother after the crime. The judge described his actions as absolutely atrocious, shameful, and unforgivable, noting that, despite being driven by misguided loyalty to his brother, Marcus had abandoned morality and human decency in favor of a criminal's interests. Marcus's sentence was retroactive to his arrest, so he was released on September 9th of the same year. Despite nearly 60,000 people signing an online petition to appeal his sentence as insufficient, Marcus expressed regret for helping his brother and publicly apologized, assuring he no longer wanted anything to do with Vincent. He returned to his father's home, but they had to move due to local hostility. They relocated to a rural town in New South Wales, keeping a low profile. A month later, on October 10, 2016, court sessions resumed for Vincent's sentencing. Stephanie's mother took the stand to speak about the emotional impact of the crime. One of her most poignant statements was lamenting that her daughter spent her wedding day in a morgue, without vows or a wedding dance. The video of Vincent's police confession from April 2015 was then shown. As everyone listened in shock, Vincent sat with his head down. Finally, on October 12, 2016, the judge announced the sentence. In his verdict, the judge described Vincent's behavior as deeply disturbing, noting his fluctuations between despair and unmet expectations, leading to deep-seated hatred. He declared the case fell within the worst category and left no doubt about Vincent's guilt. Vincent Stanford was sentenced to 15 years without parole for aggravated sexual assault and life imprisonment for the murder of Stephanie Scott. Upon the verdict's announcement, the public showed support. Just 2 weeks after Vincent's sentencing, another tragedy struck the Scott family. On October 31, 2016, while chopping trees, Bob lost his life when a trunk fell on him at the family farm. In 2018, the Scott family initiated legal action against the New South Wales Department of Education and the cleaning company that employed Vincent, citing ongoing nervous shock, a legal term for permanent psychiatric distress following a relative's death. In June 2020, both parties reached an out-of-court settlement with details kept confidential, and the Scotts received compensation. Aaron managed to rebuild his life. 5 years after the tragedy, on July 7, 2020, he announced his engagement on social media. He got married in December of that year and 2 years later welcomed a daughter named Sienna. Many consider Stephanie Scott's murder one of the most heinous crimes in recent Australian history. Such a cruel and inhuman act shook the entire country. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. October 15th, 1981. A serene evening turned into a nightmare with a violent attack. The air was thick with tension as a young life was brutally cut short. Her cries for help echoed. The woman's pantyhose were tightly wrapped around her neck, a grotesque symbol of the ferocity of the assault. She was sexually assaulted, and her struggle for life was a desperate one. Her death was agonizingly slow. In the years that followed, Sasha Stone, who lost her mother at the age of 4, embarked on a long and arduous search for answers. Sonia Carmen Hirac was born on May 27, 1951, in Quebec, eastern Canada. Little is known about her early life and home environment. The first notable events in her life trace back to her teenage years when she met David in Montreal. The two fell deeply in love, according to stories from that time. When David decided to move to California, USA, in 1972, Sonia followed him. Despite her adventurous spirit, Sonia had other dreams. She longed to marry and start a family. Their differing life goals eventually led to the end of their romantic relationship, but they remained friends. A few months later, another man entered Sonia's life, Michael. Sonia's happiness on her wedding day to Michael was captured in photographs, her radiant smile reflecting her joy. Soon after, their happiness seemed complete with the birth of their first child, Sasha, in 1977. David, maintaining his close friendship with Sonia, was named Sasha's godfather. Sonia was recognized for her sewing skills and independent entrepreneurial spirit. However, not everything was rosy. After giving birth, she struggled with postpartum depression, which worsened when Michael faced career difficulties. Their marriage began to strain, with David witnessing the tension between Sonia and Michael. To clear her mind, Sonia took Sasha and moved to Carmel, a picturesque community in Northern California known for its white sandy beaches, artistic vibe, and stunning views. Although Sonia had not yet made any drastic decisions about her marriage, she considered divorce. In Carmel, her long hair, striking beauty, and charisma made her a well-known figure. She also became notable for driving a Mercedes-Benz convertible. Her career took a positive turn when she became a rising star at Levi Strauss, working as a sales representative. In Carmel, Sonia formed a genuine friendship with another young mother, Caroline McBride. Their daughters attended the same school, which promoted children's freedom and creativity. This nurturing environment allowed Sasha and her friend to grow up happily. Around this time, a new family moved in across the street from Sonia and Sasha. The family consisted of Jean and Walter and their son, Michael Scott, known as Scott. Scott, 25, was studying photography at the Monterey Peninsula Community College. His volatile personality and poor manners made him a notorious figure in the neighborhood. Despite having no known criminal record, Scott was an odd and intimidating character with limited social aspirations. While Sonia was regaining control of her life and progressing steadily, some unsettling events began to occur. Caroline recounted that she received several mysterious phone calls with no one on the other end. Sonia also felt that she was being watched. One night in mid-September 1981, Caroline was visiting Sonia when they heard heavy footsteps outside the window. According to Caroline, Sonia did not know her neighbor Scott. While the subsequent investigation could not definitively link Scott to the phone calls or the strange occurrence in the garden, the later events strongly suggested his involvement. In the early hours of Thursday, October 15, 1981, Sonia dropped Sasha off at school and then returned home. It was then that Scott broke into her house. He managed to subdue her. The young mother, only 30 years old, fought valiantly against her attacker. Unfortunately, Scott overpowered her and soon assaulted her. Using Sonia's own stockings, he strangled her and fled the scene. Around midday, Caroline knocked on her friend's door multiple times. Worried by the lack of response, she opened the door and what she found would be etched into her memory forever. Just a few feet from the living room, she saw Sonia's partially clothed body on the floor, stockings tightly wrapped around her neck. Her purse was nearby, its contents scattered on the floor. Caroline got into her car and drove through the neighborhood, screaming for help, thinking the attacker might still be inside Sonia's house. Emergency services contacted the county sheriff's department, and Detective Williams was one of the first to arrive at the scene. Along with obvious signs of forced entry and struggle, the detective noted a significant detail on the victim's body, a broken ring fingernail, suggesting she had scratched her attacker. Initially, the detective could not identify the object around her neck, but later realized they were stockings. Detective Williams then interviewed Caroline, and immediately a suspect emerged. The detective quickly reached out to Michael Stone, informing him that he was the prime suspect without disclosing details. Unaware of the reason for police interest, Michael hurried to the station. He was told the terrible news upon arrival. Despite being cooperative, Michael's status as Sonia's ex-husband made him a natural suspect. However, Williams soon realized that pursuing this lead solely based on their relationship was unwise. News of the crime quickly spread through the community. Initially, residents of the picturesque coastal town were in disbelief, but soon a profound fear took hold. In a place where such a crime seemed unthinkable, trust among neighbors eroded. Detective Williams continued his investigation, which led him to focus on Sonia's neighbor, Scott. He approached Scott, who was injured, and claimed his injury was self-inflicted while cutting acrylic sheets in his backyard. Throughout the conversation, the officer noticed Scott's nervousness, stammering, and mumbling. These observations led the detective to consider Scott a potential suspect. These initial impressions were documented in an official report, which also included opinions gathered from interviewing various neighbors. When police spoke to Scott's parents, they learned he had given them a completely different explanation for his injury, claiming it resulted from a fight at school. To verify Scott's story, the police examined his workbench and the acrylic sheets, but found no bloodstains. When they interviewed one of his friends named Michelle, she initially said that Scott mentioned getting the scratch in an argument. Later, however, she confessed that Scott admitted being at the crime scene that morning. As authorities built their case against the prime suspect, Sonia's loved ones bid her a final farewell. The tragic actions of Scott left young Sasha bearing an unbearable burden. She suffered from night terrors and traumatic nightmares, often seeing herself as Little Red Riding Hood chased by a terrifying wolf. She would wake up screaming every night. On Monday, December 19, 1981, Scott was arrested at a traffic light for 2 outstanding speeding tickets. A detective from the Monterey County Sheriff's Office in California approached Scott's vehicle with a warrant for his DNA. Although Scott requested to speak with a lawyer, he denied him this right. This marked the beginning of several errors that negatively impacted the case. Once at the station, Scott was booked, fingerprinted, and photographed, with the police aiming to capture an image of the cut on his cheek. They proceeded to interrogate him about Sonia's murder, which was legally questionable. During the interrogation, Scott claimed he had an affair with Sonia and was at her house the day of the crime but denied any involvement in the fatal attack. Additionally, after typing up the interview reports, investigators destroyed the original case notes. With the interrogation report in hand, the deputy district attorney noted inconsistencies in Scott's account. Scott was subjected to a polygraph test and failed. At that time, DNA evidence as we know it today did not exist. The samples collected at the crime scene only allowed for blood type and other genetic markers to be identified. The tissue found under Sonia's broken nail revealed a blood type that did not match Michael's, her ex-husband. Soon after, Scott was charged with first-degree murder. Initially, Scott's trial was scheduled to begin on March 7, 1982, but repeated delays pushed it to November of the same year. One of the first to testify was a forensic serologist, an expert in biological fluids, who examined blood, semen, and urine from both the victim and the accused. He testified there was no evidence of sexual assault on Sonia's body. Next, the chief forensic pathologist from San Francisco and an expert in reconstructing sexual assault scenes stated that the evidence of such an assault did exist, particularly noting the bruises on Sonia's body. Michelle Wilson, Scott's close friend, testified for the prosecution. However, her testimony was confusing as she retracted her earlier statements, denying what she had allegedly said Scott had told her about that day. Michelle admitted that the passage of time had made her unsure about the events, leading to her being reprimanded during the following day's proceedings. On November 13, 1982, Scott's parents denied seeing a scratch on their son's face. Meanwhile, some witnesses placed Scott near Sonia's home, and the prosecution insisted the scratch on his face resulted from a struggle with Sonia. When the defense attorney requested additional time to review witness statements, the trial was further delayed, leaving the year 1982 to end without resolution. In April 1983, the defense moved to dismiss the murder charges against Scott, which the judge denied. However, the judge expressed doubts about Scott's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. On June 20, 1983, the judge criticized the investigators' procedures as unethical and illegal, pointing out that Scott was interrogated while in a psychologically weakened state. Consequently, he dismissed the murder charges against Scott. This was a significant blow to both the prosecutor and the police team. Scott seemed to have gotten away with it, but his relief was short-lived as he was brought to trial again in August 1983. As expected, he pleaded not guilty. 2 months later, the case was impacted once more by the initial haste of the police, who had interrogated Scott without honoring his request to speak with a lawyer. This time, a judge from the Montgomery County Superior Court invalidated the evidence obtained during Scott's arrest and interrogation, deeming it illegal. This allowed the defense to argue that their client had been harmed by what they called tainted evidence. During the hearing on November 17, 1983, neighbors provided varying accounts of Scott's whereabouts that day. An emergency physician from the local hospital testified that the laceration on Scott's face was consistent with a scratch from a fingernail. The credibility of the witnesses' reports negatively impacted the prosecution's case. Compounding the issue was the fact that the investigators' original notes had been destroyed. There was no way to verify what was said and what the officer had noted, making it impossible to contrast with the typewritten statements. The defense attorney pointed out discrepancies between the typewritten statements and the witnesses' testimonies on the stand. On November 24, 1983, Scott claimed he had been playing softball the day of the crime. Apparently, none of his softball teammates were contacted. 2 weeks later, when the jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict, the judge declared a mistrial. Scott, visibly relieved, spoke to the press outside the courthouse, stating that he was not surprised by the decision as he had always maintained his innocence and felt he had been falsely accused. Following the 2 judicial setbacks, the prosecutors dismissed the case, concluding that the available evidence was insufficient for a conviction. Scott then lived as a free man, finding work as a forklift operator for a well-known American retailer of tools and home goods. In 2007, he also secured employment as a school bus driver for the Salinas Unified School District. Simultaneously, he coached Little League Baseball, earning the affection of both the children and their parents. He continued living in the area, becoming a father and grandfather, and was never accused of another crime. In stark contrast, Michael, Sonia's ex-husband, became the focus of public suspicion in the absence of a convicted culprit. This scrutiny led Michael to leave the country and move to Canada. As Sasha grew older and fully understood the events, her anger grew, a rage fueled by the lack of answers and the fact that her mother's killer had never been caught. As a teenager, she turned to the detective in charge of the case, seeking to understand why the investigation wasn't reopened. Beyond emotional support and explanations related to bureaucracy and the law, he couldn't do much more for her. Resolving to ensure her mother's crime was not forgotten, Sasha channeled her energy into advocating for victims, dedicating herself to restorative justice, an approach that encourages offenders to take responsibility and recognize the harm they've caused through discussions with victims and community members. This work brought her immense satisfaction and allowed her to demonstrate great professionalism. In 2009, a significant event brought new hope for justice for Sonia. With the detective of the case retired, a new detective was assigned to the case. By then, investigators had a tool unavailable in the 1980s: DNA testing. The following year, a forensic expert from the California Department of Justice began testing old samples, including the blood found under Sonia's nails. The sample yielded a male DNA profile. The goal was to compare it with a sample of Scott's DNA, stored in small vials for nearly 30 years. However, at some point over the years, these vials had broken, spilling their contents into the envelope containing Sonia's nails. The material was so severely degraded that they could only generate a weak male profile from it. Although he believed Scott was the suspect, he wasn't entirely certain. To confirm this, they needed a new DNA sample from Scott. Lacking the necessary funds and resources, the county sheriff's office couldn't obtain it, and the case was shelved again in 2013. Many years passed without any progress until late 2020, when the county district attorney formed a task force focused on dozens of cold cases with available DNA evidence. A new detective was assigned to revisit Sonia's case. He dove into the old files and consulted past detectives to discuss the details. The deputy district attorney then collaborated with the detectives to re-examine all the evidence, deducing that some of it could now be tested with DNA technology that wasn't available when Scott was first tried. They discovered that Scott still lived and worked in the same county, and soon obtained a judge's order to collect his genetic material. The new DNA sample and the crime scene evidence were sent to the Department of Justice laboratory for analysis. The results revealed a conclusive match. Consequently, Scott, now 65 years old, was arrested at his home in Seaside and detained at the county jail on suspicion of murder. His bail was set at $1 million. The news shocked many residents, including students who had relied on his daily transportation services. The Salinas Unified School District faced scrutiny from anxious parents, understandably outraged that one of their bus drivers was allegedly involved in such a heinous crime. Swiftly, the district initiated the process to place Scott on administrative leave. Upon hearing of the arrest, Sasha, then 44 years old, was overwhelmed with happiness at the prospect of long-awaited justice. Scott's new trial began on January 30th, 2023. Although it was expected to last several weeks, it concluded in just 8 days, ample time for the defense to thoroughly cross-examine all witnesses. Scott's fate was sealed on Tuesday, February 7th, when, after nearly 6 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted him of first-degree murder. They also found true a special circumstance allegation that the crime occurred during the commission or attempted commission of a rape, making him eligible for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Victim impact statements included heartfelt words from Sasha and her father, Michael Stone, who spoke about how the crime had profoundly affected their lives. In April 2023, Sasha took the stage as an inspirational speaker at the National Crime Victims' Rights Week ceremony in Salinas, California. Speaking to a crowd that included many who had lost loved ones to violence, she painted a realistic picture of the impacts of trauma and violent crimes. Sasha emphasized that overcoming such devastation required developing inner strength, resilience, humility, compassion, grace, generosity, and forgiveness. She concluded her speech by paying special tribute to her mother, who remained her motivation for her work. 2 months later, on June 12, 2023, Michael Scott, 67, was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for the 1981 murder of 30-year-old Sonia Carmen Herock. Although the detectives never had the chance to meet Sonia, finding her killer more than 4 decades later meant a great deal to them. As the first detective in charge of the case, he had wrestled with the ghosts of not strictly adhering to the law, feeling a debt to Sasha, whose pain had always stayed with him in some way. Now, he was certain he had done everything possible to deliver the justice Sasha so fervently sought. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
Can you tell me what a lie is?
It's not the truth.
Can you tell me what the truth is?
It's not a lie.
If I told you your mother was in the courtroom here today, would that be the truth?
No, so.
That would not be the truth. Why is that? Because she's not in the courtroom?
No, so.
Okay. Where is your mother?
Jill.
AJ?
So.
When is the last time that you saw your mother? Do you remember?
No, so.
Has it been a long time?
Yes, so.
That woman sitting right there between them, Have you ever seen her before?
Yes, so.
Who is that?
My mother.
Now you recognize your mother?
Yes, so.
AJ? AJ,
Yes, so.
give me your hand. All right.
Details about the early life of Amanda Lewis are scarce, but it is known that she was born in the early 1980s. Her mother, Brenda, raised her in Alabama, USA. At some point, Brenda married a man named Charles Burns, who became Amanda's stepfather and was actively involved in her upbringing. Amanda described herself as a restless, talkative, and sometimes problematic child who often struggled to follow rules. These traits might have contributed to her becoming a mother at the young age of 15. Unfortunately, her early motherhood ended in tragedy when her baby, Alex, died at 16 months old from a seizure disorder. Amanda recounted that on the day Alex passed away, she had left him sleeping while she took a bath. When she returned, she found him not breathing and rushed him to the emergency room, but it was too late. Later, while still in Alabama, Amanda entered what seemed to be a stable relationship, resulting in the birth of 2 children, Adriana Elaine Hutto and Andrew Jordan Hutto. Adriana was born on September 16, 1999, and his younger brother, Andrew, affectionately known as AJ, followed about a year later. Despite sharing the same last name, many sources indicate that the kids were half-brothers with different fathers. After the relationship ended, Amanda relocated with her children to a small community called Esto in Florida. Esto, a town of approximately 360 residents, had historically relied on the timber industry, and more recently, agriculture and manufacturing. It also attracted tourists seeking natural beauty and tranquility. Amanda quickly adapted to her new environment, appreciating the peace and basic amenities it offered. She trained as a nursing assistant and secured a job at a nearby care and rehabilitation center, which provided her with stability. Despite the semblance of a stable life with a steady job, a simple home, and her 2 children, Amanda faced significant challenges. Her eldest daughter, Adriana, who was 7 at the time, was diagnosed with Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD. ADHD is a common neurodevelopmental disorder in children, characterized by difficulties in maintaining attention, impulsivity, and high levels of activity. Amanda found it challenging to form a close and calm relationship with Adriana, who required medication to manage her symptoms. The difficulties with Adriana contrasted with her relationship with AJ, which seemed to be less strained. She got along well with him as he was a calm child who could spend hours playing with his toy tractors. The contrast between the siblings' personalities was striking. Adriana required more attention both at home and at school, where the teachers were aware of her condition. However, this did not prevent Amanda from being called in on several occasions because her daughter had gotten into fights with other classmates, used foul language, or caused some sort of trouble. Additionally, Adriana occasionally wet her pants. Despite these setbacks, her teacher noted that her behavior was improving, and she was a smart girl who loved to read. At home, Adriana displayed the same behaviors, leading Amanda to frequently resort to time out as a form of punishment. This practice involves removing the misbehaving child from the area where the incident occurred, placing them in a separate spot, and leaving them alone to calm down and, if possible, reflect on their actions. However, as Amanda later admitted, not all moments were reflective. On some occasions, she used physical punishment to curb her daughter's misbehavior. At some point, Amanda met a new partner, a young man named Alan Carnley, who also came from Alabama. He had just come out of a failed relationship, from which he had 2 children. It appears that Alan's breakup was amicable, as there were no custody issues, and his children frequently visited and spent time with him and his new family. The events that unfolded in the summer of 2007 would change their lives forever. The family lived in a refurbished trailer on a spacious plot of land. That summer was particularly hot in Florida, so Alan decided to buy a pool to help beat the heat. The pool provided an opportunity for family fun, as his kids were also visiting at the time. The pool excited everyone, and the couple set strict rules for Amanda's younger children, prohibiting them from using it without an adult present. Amanda even removed the ladder to prevent the kids from accessing the pool unsupervised, storing it in the shed to eliminate any temptation. On Wednesday, August 8, 2007, early in the morning, Amanda returned home exhausted after a night shift at work. Eager to catch up on lost sleep, she decided to take a nap before starting the day's family activities, which included shopping for school supplies. That morning, the kids woke up and, according to Amanda, didn't want breakfast. After saying goodbye to her partner as he left for work, she left the kids watching cartoons on TV. One of Alan's sons, who was also in the house, was woken up by his father but was too sleepy to stay awake. He barely heard Adriana and AJ arguing before dozing off again. He heard them yelling, but it was nothing out of the ordinary, so he went back to sleep. According to Amanda's later account, she woke up sometime before noon and began tidying up the house before heading out with her children to shop for school supplies. Since they would have to wait a bit, she suggested that the kids go outside to play while she finished her chores. At one point, AJ came into the house to tell her that Adriana was in the pool. Initially, this didn't alarm her. She assumed her daughter was just playing near the pool. She instructed AJ to call Adriana and have both kids come back inside. Amanda then went back into the house, picked up her cell phone, and called her partner. She was talking to Alan while walking towards the window overlooking the pool. Everything changed when she saw AJ standing on a ladder at the edge of the pool, splashing his hands in the water. Amanda immediately ran outside, pulled her son away from the pool's edge, and was horrified to see Adriana floating face down in the water, her skin blue and lifeless. She described how she stretched her arms from the poolside, grabbed her daughter's feet, and pulled her out of the water. Once she had Adriana in her arms, she laid her on the grass, face up. The phone call with Alan was still active, and she screamed to him what had happened. Alan instructed her to call 911. As emergency personnel arrived, Amanda began performing CPR on Adriana, relying on her training as a nurse, although she admitted she had never had to use those skills in a real-life situation until then. The first responders on the scene were firefighters, with Unit Chief Charles taking over the resuscitation efforts as they awaited the arrival of medical and police teams. Their efforts seemed to yield some results. Adriana showed faint signs of life. Given the severity of Adriana's condition and the lack of advanced medical facilities in the small town of Esto, she was airlifted, accompanied by her mother, to the nearest hospital. Amid all the commotion, Alan's son woke up and, looking out the window, saw the frantic efforts to revive his stepsister. Before leaving, Amanda shouted to him to take care of his half-brother, AJ, and bring him inside. Later, the police contacted Amanda's children's grandparents to come and pick up AJ. Upon arriving at the hospital, the emergency doctor immediately took over Adriana's care, with a team working intensively to stabilize her and restore her vital signs. For a moment, it seemed they had succeeded. Adriana had a pulse. Tragically, after nearly an hour of effort, they lost the battle. Adriana, 7 years old, was pronounced dead at 5:05 that afternoon. Amanda later recounted that when she was told her daughter had passed, she felt her stomach churn. She was allowed to see Adriana one last time, kissing and hugging her, knowing it would be their final goodbye. In the eyes of the doctors, emergency staff, and police, it was a tragic accident, much like many others involving young children and bodies of water such as pools. While it was a tragic event, it could have easily marked the end of the story. However, miles away from the hospital where Adriana was declared deceased, her younger brother, AJ, left everyone stunned with a shocking account. Upon arriving at his grandparents' house, as they tried to calm him down, the little boy suddenly said that his mother had drowned Adriana. Naturally, upon hearing such a statement, Brenda and Charles, Amanda's mother and stepfather, were completely shocked and bewildered. The couple talked with the boy for a while, thinking he might have misunderstood something, but after asking him some questions and finding his answers convincing, they decided to take AJ to the police station to speak with the officers. With the grandparents' permission, AJ was questioned by the police, during which he stated that his mother had held his sister underwater as a punishment. According to the boy's account that morning, Adriana had taken a bottle of window cleaner and sprayed it all over the living room, the curtains, and the TV. AJ continued, saying that when his mother discovered what had happened, she became very angry, dragged her 7-year-old daughter to the pool, put her in it, and held her head under the water until she stopped moving. This story was repeated multiple times during 2 interviews with investigators and a third with a child expert. Although several aspects of the boy's story varied across the different interviews, the claim that his mother had submerged his sister's head underwater remained consistent. As a result, the authorities launched an investigation, starting with a thorough inspection of the house where the incident occurred. During this search, several things became evident. The bedroom shared by AJ and his sister was in disarray, with a broken bunk bed, complete disorganization, and a strong smell of urine. The word neglect echoed in the investigators' minds. Aside from the neglect, what shocked the detectives the most was the lack of toys in a room shared by 2 children. Naturally, Amanda was summoned to the police station to provide a statement and respond to her son's accusations. She appeared astonished and vehemently denied that her son's account had any truth to it. When confronted with the results of the house inspection, she explained that there were few toys in the children's room because she had thrown out the broken ones and donated the rest as a punishment for Adriana's bad behavior. As for the overwhelming smell of urine, she had no choice but to acknowledge it, explaining that Adriana often wet the bed. The investigators requested that Amanda undergo a polygraph test. She agreed immediately and successfully passed the test. However, her situation was further complicated by the autopsy results on her daughter's body. The post-mortem examinations confirmed that the cause of death was drowning, but they also revealed clear signs of assault on the girl's face. There were visible bruises that covered nearly the entire face and closely matched the size of an adult hand. With this evidence, on September 5, 2007, Amanda was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, facing the possibility of a life sentence or even the death penalty. The proceedings to prepare the case for trial began immediately. Although the authorities offered Amanda a plea deal, which would have required her to plead guilty to manslaughter in exchange for a 10-year sentence, she refused and chose to face trial for the charge against her. In the months leading up to the trial, investigators scrutinized all of AJ's statements to ensure that the young boy was not fabricating or confusing events. During interviews, they asked him questions such as what he was watching on TV that day and what other events occurred. He mentioned cartoons airing at that time, a helicopter flying overhead, and tree-cutting activities near his house to protect power lines. All these events were verified, showing that A.J. remembered the day perfectly. Investigators also conducted interviews with family members, neighbors, co-workers, educators, and first responders who arrived at Amanda's house following the 911 call. The goal was to understand the family dynamics and ascertain the truth of what had happened. One of the interviewees was the doctor who had informed Amanda of Adriana's death. The doctor noted that Amanda's reaction to the tragic news was peculiar, as she showed no signs of grief. Instead, she asked where the vending machine was. With all the evidence gathered, the case went to trial on February 9, 2008. Over the next 4 days, Amanda's fate would be decided. Witnesses for both the prosecution and the defense took the stand. Authorities who responded to Amanda's emergency call in August 2007 described the dramatic scene they encountered, seeing Adriana clinging to life before she ultimately passed away. Testimonies were also heard from Alan and his children, who spoke about the family dynamics and details of the day in question. Amanda's boyfriend recounted what he heard while on the phone with Amanda during the incident. Alan's son had little to contribute as he had been asleep all morning and only emerged after the commotion began. Alan's daughter wasn't present on the day of the incident, but she narrated an earlier event at her aunt Amanda's pool. She described Amanda trying to teach Adriana to swim despite the child's terror, at one point threatening to let her go. She also stated that she often supervised the children while Amanda slept, witnessing Adriana being punished by being confined to a room for an entire day. Testimonies from Amanda's co-workers were particularly damning. They recounted an instance when Amanda, furious, brought Adriana to the nursing home, repeatedly saying she would gladly take her life. These harsh words, spoken in front of the child, were seen as inappropriate and cruel by her colleagues. On that particular morning, Adriana had taken a marker from Amanda's car and scribbled all over the interior, even writing "loser" in one spot. The trial highlighted how Adriana's ADHD had prevented Amanda from forming a positive relationship with her, but 2 testimonies stood out, those of Amanda and her son, AJ. As we saw at the beginning, AJ, after 6 months of not seeing his mother, took a while to recognize her and cried when he did. During her testimony on the stand, Amanda acknowledged that her daughter's behavioral problems had made their relationship difficult. She described Adriana as extroverted and hyperactive, noting that she was very much like herself, stubborn and always by her side. Amanda claimed that Adriana sometimes displayed violent behavior, recalling an incident where the girl threatened her younger brother with a sharp kitchen tool. Amanda also admitted that she had once placed Adriana in a specialized institution for 6 days. She confessed to the court that she might not have loved her daughter as much as she should have. Amanda stated that she often punished Adriana by confining her to her room, the same smelly and dirty room that shocked the investigators. She also took away most of the toys as a punishment for leaving them scattered around. Amanda admitted that she occasionally lost her temper and would slap or spank Adriana, such as during the incident when Adriana had written on the car with a marker. Amanda described how Adriana had just begun learning to swim, could move her arms and legs a bit, but was terrified of putting her head underwater. Amanda insisted that she was not teaching Adriana to submerge her head. When asked if she knew how to swim, Amanda replied that she did. Sticking to her version of events, Amanda admitted that when AJ told her Adriana was in the pool, she didn't immediately check on her. Instead, she called her partner and only looked out the window later. She saw AJ at the pool's edge trying to reach Adriana, who was splashing in the water. That was when, according to her, she rushed to help but was already too late. Amanda's defense argued that Adriana's death was a tragic accident. They claimed that the girl had pushed her brother's toy cart to the pool's edge, climbed on it, and used a tray to scoop out insects from the water. When she leaned over, the edge of the inflatable pool gave way and Adriana fell in. During the trial, the prosecution questioned Amanda about how she had pulled Adriana out of the pool. Amanda admitted that she hadn't given her daughter breakfast or her medication that morning, claiming that Adriana had said she didn't feel well. It later emerged that neither child had eaten breakfast or lunch by the time of the incident around midday. Another critical piece of testimony came from the autopsy report on Adriana. The original forensic specialist did not testify as he had been dismissed for negligence in over 30 autopsies. Instead, the director of investigations at the medical examiner's office explained the autopsy process and findings, emphasizing the bruises on Adriana's face. Amanda's defense strongly challenged this testimony, questioning whether the marks were definitively from a hand. The expert had to admit that she couldn't be absolutely certain. Then came the pivotal moment in the trial, AJ's testimony. In a lengthy and exhausting interrogation for a 7-year-old, AJ recounted the events he had described many times before to investigators. This time, he included a drawing he had made during psychological support sessions, illustrating what had happened. After his long testimony, AJ faced cross-examination from Amanda's defense, who pressed him until he became visibly confused and tired, giving contradictory answers. Despite this, the prosecution deemed him a credible witness, supported by other significant details, such as the fact that Adriana was tall enough to stand in the pool and easily lift her head above the water. With these elements, the trial proceeded, culminating in a dramatic and crucial phase where the truth about Adriana's death hung in the balance. In the end, while the defense argued that Adriana's tragic death was a very unfortunate accident, the prosecution maintained that Amanda had maliciously punished her daughter. The prosecution argued that Amanda had reached her breaking point due to immense stress and exhaustion, having tried numerous ways to discipline her daughter, none of which seemed effective. In a moment of overwhelming frustration, Amanda snapped. After all testimonies concluded, the jury deliberated for only 2 hours, including lunch, before returning with a verdict. They found Amanda Lewis guilty of first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. The following month, during the sentencing hearing, the judge issued a life sentence plus an additional 30 years for aggravated child abuse. Amanda has attempted several appeals, none of which have been successful. She remains incarcerated at Lowell Correctional Institution. Reports following the trial's conclusion indicated that AJ was cared for by his grandparents in the months after the incident. However, once the judicial process was complete, AJ was reportedly put up for adoption. Since then, his life has been kept private. By 2024, AJ would be 24 years old, and we can only hope that his life has been significantly better than how it began. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. On a quiet October afternoon in 2005, a tragic accident shattered the lives of everyone involved. 14-month-old Kyle Lazarchik was found unresponsive in his home, his tiny body marked with mysterious injuries. The young nanny, Ada Quadros, frantically dialed 911, but what happened next would change her life forever. As paramedics raced to the scene, the grim reality of Kyle's condition became evident. Despite Ada's desperate attempts to save him, the baby's injuries were severe. But what could have caused such a tragedy? The answers seemed elusive. Ada Quadros was born on September 13, 1977, in the coastal town of Chimbote, Peru. She was the first child of Victor Quadros, a veterinarian, and Luz Fernandez, a teacher. Ada was the eldest of 4 siblings and consistently excelled academically, even winning knowledge contests. She had a happy childhood filled with dreams of self-improvement. Ada later recounted that she spent much of her childhood with one of her sisters on their grandparents' farm, enjoying the close connection with nature and animals. This period was one of the happiest times of her life. Although Ada's family wasn't poor, they were not wealthy either. During her teenage years, she looked for ways to contribute financially. Together with her sister and a friend, she formed a group to entertain at children's parties. After high school, Ada enrolled in a private university to study law. Unfortunately, her financial situation did not allow her to continue, and she had to drop out. Despite this setback, Ada was determined to succeed and support her family. With this goal in mind, she applied for a U.S. visa through the lottery program. Like many young people from Peru and other Latin American countries, Ada saw the United States as a land of opportunities. She was determined to move there, work hard, earn a better income, and pave the way for a brighter future for herself and her family. Her family was thrilled for her. They sold some belongings and did everything possible to gather enough money for her journey. Her destination was Texas, where she initially planned to stay with some relatives. In early 2004, she began working as a waitress in a restaurant. After some time, she joined a company that placed nannies in households. This is how she met the Lazarkic family. The Lazarkic family consisted of Father Michael, commonly known as Mike, Mother Renee, their eldest daughter Alyssa, and twin boys Ryan and Kyle. Little is known about the family's background except that they married in 2000. Shortly after their wedding, Renee became pregnant with their first daughter, Alyssa. Just 4 months after Alyssa's birth, Renee was expecting again, this time with twins Kyle and Ryan. The Lazarkic couple wanted to hire a trustworthy nanny to take care of the twins when Renee returned to work. Alyssa was already comfortable in a daycare she attended daily, where she had made several friends, so they decided she would continue going there. The couple interviewed several candidates, and Ada stood out as the best option. At 27 years old, she was young but not a teenager. She appeared healthy, strong, well-mannered, and cheerful. Renee wanted Ada to start immediately so she could spend a few weeks with her, explaining the household routines, where things were, and what was expected of her. She also wanted to observe how Ada handled the young twins, who were just over a year old. The family had one specific request. They needed assurance that Ada could commit to staying with them for 18 months, and Ada committed to this arrangement. Initially, it was agreed that she would only spend the day at the Lazarkic household, but after some time, they asked her to live in, and Ada agreed. From then on, she only left on weekends to stay at her uncle's house. Everything seemed to go smoothly. The Lazarkic family was pleased with Ada's work and grew fond of her, trusting her completely. Numerous photos captured happy moments with the smiling young nanny holding the twins. However, everything changed in the summer of 2005. Ada informed the Lazarkic family that her uncles were returning to Peru before moving on to Germany. Ada was prepared to go with them and had already purchased her plane ticket for October 29th of that year. Understandably, this was disappointing news for the couple since it was not what they had agreed upon. Eventually, they understood and only asked Ada to stay until they could find a replacement. They even requested her help in searching for and selecting her successor. Ada agreed, but from that point on, she no longer stayed overnight at the Lazarkic home. Instead, she returned to her uncle's house each night and came back early in the morning. Given the change in circumstances and Ada's impending departure, the Lazarkic family scheduled interviews with several nanny candidates for Wednesday, October 12th. During the day, Renee called Ada and asked her to prepare macaroni and cheese for the children. Ada complied and fed the kids. When Renee returned home, she greeted her children, saw they were well, and after interviewing the candidates, spent over an hour with her little ones before they went to bed. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, at 5 a.m. on Thursday, October 13th, Kyle woke up crying, which was unusual. The twins were typically heavy sleepers and never woke up on their own. It always took someone to wake them. Nonetheless, Renee got up, went to the twins' room, picked up Kyle, and soothed him until he fell back asleep. She then returned to bed. 2 hours later, at 7:30, Mike went to the children's room, woke them up, hugged and kissed them, and left them in Ada's care before heading to work. Renee woke up just before 9:30 and spent some time with the twins. She changed Ryan's diaper, said goodbye to both him and Kyle, and left for work. The children were fine, with nothing out of the ordinary except Kyle's early wake-up. That day, their older sister Alyssa went to daycare as usual. But things took a dramatic turn around 1 p.m. when Ada called 911, highly agitated, saying that one of the children, Kyle, had stopped breathing and was turning blue. After providing the address, the operator gave Ada instructions to perform CPR on the child. Ada followed the instructions while paramedics were on their way. A few minutes later, they arrived at the house and took over Kyle's care. They asked Ada what had happened, and she, very distressed, explained that after lunch, she had put Kyle in his crib and returned to get his brother. But when she got back with Ryan, Kyle started vomiting and stopped breathing. While paramedics attended to Kyle, Ada called Renee to inform her of the situation, giving her a different version of events. She said that after feeding the children, she took Kyle out of his high chair and, as usual, placed him on the playroom floor while she fetched his brother. But when she returned, Kyle was vomiting. She went to the kitchen to get a bowl to catch the vomit, and when she returned, Kyle had fallen. She said she picked him up, took him to the sink, and performed the maneuver Renee had taught her in case one of the children stopped breathing. But it didn't work, and she also attempted CPR. After initial treatment, the paramedics transported Kyle to the nearest hospital. When Renee arrived at the house, the ambulance with her son had already left, but the police were still at the scene. Renee took Ryan, the other twin, and asked Ada to accompany them. They followed the police, who escorted them to the hospital. During the drive, Renee called her husband, and they met at the medical center. A few minutes later, the doctors decided to transfer Kyle by helicopter to the Dallas Children's Hospital. The Lazarkics returned home, left Ada to care for Ryan, and headed to the Dallas Children's Hospital. Ada asked them to keep her informed about Kyle's condition. On the way to the hospital, Renee started worrying that Ada might be too nervous to look after Ryan properly, so she called a friend to assist the nanny at the house. Shortly after, her friend arrived at the house. Ada, visibly distressed and crying, opened the door for her. She asked Ada to explain what had happened. According to her account, Ada said that Kyle was standing between the playroom and the kitchen when he suddenly collapsed. Ada claimed she dropped a plate she was holding, picked Kyle up, took him to the living room, and performed CPR on him. She recalled Ada mentioning that Kyle's brain hadn't fully developed and that this issue had started at birth. She didn't fully understand, but Ada kept talking, saying she loved Kyle and would never hurt him. She tried to calm the very upset nanny, reassuring her that she hadn't done anything wrong and that she was a good person. Meanwhile, at the Dallas Children's Hospital, the Lazarkick family received devastating news. The doctor in charge of Kyle reported that the child had suffered severe head injuries, with multiple bruises on his head, arm, and left shoulder. A neurosurgeon met with the distressed parents to explain that something had to be done to relieve the pressure on Kyle's brain, though survival was unlikely. A child abuse specialist who also met with Mike and Renee suggested that Kyle's injuries could be consistent with abuse. The specialist stated that Kyle's injuries were so severe, it was as if he had been in a car accident or fallen from a sixth floor. Initially, Renee couldn't believe it. She thought Ada might have accidentally dropped the child or was too scared or ashamed to admit it. But the doctors clearly explained the extent of Kyle's head injuries and the force required to cause them. With this information, the possibility of an accident seemed implausible. Renee immediately called another friend to pick up Ryan and take him away from the house. While this was happening at the hospital, Ada became increasingly anxious at home. Renee's friend had to leave to pick up her son from school and take him home. During her absence, Ada called her several times, asking if there was any news about Kyle. When Renee's friend returned to the house, she found Ada calm. Ada was no longer crying or talking. Shortly after, a police car drove by the house. Upon seeing it, Ada lost her composure. She began crying uncontrollably and shouting, "No, no, no!" She collapsed to the floor behind a door, repeatedly insisting she would never harm Kyle. Two female detectives arrived to interview Ada as the person who had called 911 about the injured child. She had been the only adult present when the incident occurred. As the detectives located the house and got out of their patrol car, they heard Ada's cries. Upon entering, they found her extremely agitated. When Ada was able to speak, she explained that she had taken Kyle out of his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor. She was patting his back to help him burp when he suddenly began to vomit. Ada said she went to the kitchen to get a container to catch the vomit, as Renee disliked stains on the floor. While she was cleaning, Kyle turned blue, fell, and started convulsing. She claimed she took him to the living room, called 911, and followed the dispatcher's instructions. During the interview, the other officer called the hospital to get an update on Kyle's condition. When they discovered the diagnosis, detectives told Ada that her story did not account for the injuries Kyle had. Ada suggested that Kyle might have hit his head when he fell after she left him alone in the playroom. But the officers noted that the playroom floor was covered with soft rugs, making this explanation unlikely. Trying to offer another explanation, Ada said that Kyle might have hit his head on the door frame when she carried him on her hip. At the officer's insistence, Ada demonstrated how Kyle could have been hurt and mentioned that Mike and Renee often bumped Kyle's head without any problems. The officer checked the spot where Ada claimed Kyle hit his head but found no evidence of a strong impact. When the officers told her that the injury didn't seem severe enough to cause the extensive damage the doctors described, Ada insisted that the impact was strong because she was running with Kyle in her arms. She also stated that she had never shaken or hit either of the twins. The officers urged Ada to tell the truth, as it could save Kyle's life, but Ada provided no further explanation. Given the circumstances, the officers reported the situation to their command and took Ada into preventive custody for further questioning. Meanwhile, crime scene investigation units arrived to examine the house. After completing their task, they informed Renee's friend, who had stayed at the house on behalf of the owners, that they could clean up and organize everything for the family's return. While several friends cleaned the house, they found a piece of adhesive tape sticking out from the door of a cabinet under the kitchen island. When they opened the door, they noticed it was broken and held together by tape. As a result, opening it caused the door to become misaligned. They simply placed it back and secured it with the tape, but found it strange because Renee was always careful with broken items to prevent the children from getting hurt. They had a hunch and called the police to report the door. Shortly after, investigators returned to collect potential evidence. Later, when questioned about the cabinet door, Renee stated that she frequently used that door and had never seen it held with adhesive tape. By Friday, October 14th, all of Mike and Renee's hopes had vanished. The doctors informed them that Kyle was brain dead and had no chance of recovery. Amid indescribable pain, the couple authorized the removal of life support, after which Kyle passed away. 3 days later, on October 17th, the detectives interviewed Ada in prison, where she was accused of premeditated assault on a minor. This time, Ada claimed that the day before the incident, she was preparing the macaroni and cheese that Renee had requested. She had Kyle sitting on the kitchen counter, and the child fell, landing headfirst on the kitchen floor and hitting his head hard. Ada said she picked him up and checked for injuries. The only thing she noticed was redness on his ear and the right side of his head, so she applied cold compresses and gave him a pain reliever. When the interrogators asked why she hadn't told this to the other officers, Ada said she thought they wouldn't believe her. She mentioned that she didn't tell Renee because when she arrived home from work, she complained of a severe headache. Ada said Renee suffered from migraines and had requested that the lights be turned off and the house be kept quiet. The interrogators asked if she had fallen with the child, which she adamantly denied. During that interrogation, Ada learned that Kyle had died, and she cried for the rest of the interview. Ada was brought before the courts, where a judge charged her with aggravated homicide and set bail at $750,000, which was beyond the means of Ada or her family, so she remained in custody until the trial. At that time, the police indicated that she might be charged with premeditated actions, which could carry the death penalty. The case of Kyle's death went to trial in the second half of 2005. The doctor who examined Kyle at Dallas Children's Hospital testified that when he received Kyle, the child was already unconscious. He described multiple hematomas on the right side of Kyle's head, as well as bruises on the left side of his head and shoulder and both arms. Additionally, there were 2 small hemorrhages forming hematomas on the right temple. Kyle had 3 main areas of hematomas on his head, indicating 3 separate impacts. He added that the bruises were relatively recent, one possibly 12 to 16 hours old. Internally, Kyle had brain and retinal bleeding, indicative of severe trauma, even though there were no broken bones. The brain tissue was notably swollen, and the pressure inside Kyle's head was 90 millimeters of mercury, whereas the normal level is 20 millimeters. Based on these findings, he concluded that Kyle had suffered severe traumatic events consistent with blunt force trauma, possibly from someone hitting his head against a hard object. He suggested the type of injuries could result from shaking and swinging a young child's head against a solid object, like a kitchen cabinet door. A Dallas County forensic expert testified that the autopsy revealed multiple overlapping small hematomas on Kyle's scalp, along with a couple of punctate abrasions on the right temple, separated by over a centimeter. There were also 4 or 5 pairs of similar lesions on his head. His brain showed significant hemorrhage and swelling, with retinal hemorrhages in both eyes, requiring substantial force to cause such injuries. She concluded that the cause of death was severe head injuries from blunt force trauma, agreeing that Kyle's head might have been struck multiple times against the wooden door of the kitchen cabinet. She ruled out the possibility that Kyle had merely bumped into a door frame or fallen from the kitchen counter. Another critical testimony came from a forensic analyst who measured the distance between the fasteners on the broken kitchen cabinet door and found it matched the punctate abrasions on Kyle's head. This expert also analyzed the adhesive tape used to repair the cabinet door and discovered 2 DNA traces, one of which had a much higher contribution and matched Ada's DNA. The lesser trace could not be identified. After hearing from the experts, it was Mike's turn to testify. He stated that Kyle was fine on the night of October 12th and the morning of October 13th with no bruises. He also mentioned that he prepared breakfast that morning, opening and closing the kitchen cabinet doors to get utensils and food, and that all doors were in perfect condition, including the one later found inexplicably repaired with tape. The parents shared that they had breakfast with the children and played with blocks, with the twins crawling around a playhouse. Based on all the evidence, it was easy to conclude that the events leading to Kyle's death occurred when no other adults were in the house except Ada. The case prosecutor stated that the exact circumstances of what happened to Kyle might never be known for sure, but based on the evidence presented at trial, she painted a possible scenario. Perhaps Kyle didn't want to eat his lunch, and Ada, feeling frustrated or distracted by watching a soap opera, might have taken him out of his high chair without noticing the cabinet door was open. The prosecutor speculated that Ada's rage might have triggered the vicious attack on Kyle's head using the cabinet door until it broke, with the door's screws leaving marks on the child. After all the testimonies and closing arguments, the jury went to deliberate. Upon returning, they found Ada Quadros guilty of capital murder of a child under 6 years old. As the verdict was read, Ada's mother, Luz Fernandez, who had traveled from Peru when her daughter was arrested, stood up and shouted that she would free Ada because she was innocent. She proclaimed that there was no evidence to convict her daughter and vowed to start over and appeal. After the jury members left, Kyle's parents showed photographs and videos of their deceased son, recounting his brief 14 months of life from birth to the last photo taken days before his death. Family members spoke about Kyle, while others simply couldn't stop crying. Ada was sentenced the following year in 2006 to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For Ada and her family, giving up was not an option. Her parents immediately started a campaign to appeal the sentence, arguing that Ada's conviction was based on racial prejudice and ineffective public defense. However, appealing required money for legal representation and process costs, which the family did not have. Undeterred, they sought support from various sources, including the Peruvian government, the Peruvian and Latino communities in the United States, and solidarity organizations in Peru. In prison, Ada maintained her innocence and took every opportunity for interviews to assert it. Their persistence paid off, and in 2009, Ada's legal representation filed an appeal, citing 5 specific errors in the initial trial. After reviewing the case, the appeals court dismissed 3 of the claims but agreed with 2. This was enough for the judges to overturn the conviction and annul the trial due to irregularities. Following this decision, Ada's family began another fundraising effort to cover the $100,000 needed for a new trial. It took another 3 years to prepare for the new trial, which began on July 10, 2012, with the selection of 12 jurors from over 100 candidates. The trial took place in Collin County's Justice Hall. The defense argued that Kyle had fallen from the kitchen counter on October 12th, injuring his head, and the situation worsened the next day when Ada, running with the child in her arms, accidentally struck his head on the doorframe. This time, the defense presented testimony from a forensic expert with 40 years of experience. He suggested that some of Kyle's bruises might have been caused at the hospital during catheter insertion to assess brain swelling. The prosecution fiercely challenged this testimony. David Gardner, an employee of the kitchen cabinet manufacturer, also testified for the defense. He proposed alternative explanations for the broken cabinet door, though he didn't entirely rule out that Kyle's head could have been struck against it. A poignant moment in the trial was Mike's testimony, where he described Kyle's last 2 days connected to numerous tubes and machines, eventually being taken off life support and dying in his parents' arms. The defense argued there wasn't enough evidence to convict Ada, but the prosecution highlighted the medical findings and the numerous times Ada changed her story. After the sessions concluded, the jury deliberated for 5 hours, even requesting to listen to the 911 call recordings again. Ultimately, they once again found Ada Quadros, then 33, guilty of capital murder and sentenced her to life imprisonment without parole. Back in prison, Ada joined the prison volleyball team, learned Braille, and won an art contest with a drawing of the Virgin Mary, which she auctioned to raise funds for a new appeal. Ada, from her cell, maintains her innocence, her spirit unbroken as she and her family continue their fight for an appeal, seeking a chance to prove what they believe to be the truth. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.